the moment Jasmine Crockett uttered the words, "Don't call this normal." It wasn't just a rebuttal, it was a declaration of resistance against the casual way power is often presented and sanitized by mainstream media. The exchange between Crockett and Nicolle Wallace may have seemed like just another television debate to the untrained eye, but for millions of Americans tuning in, it struck a chord that resonated far deeper than a political soundbite. This wasn't merely about policy. It was about a system that repeatedly harms working people while congratulating itself for halting the damage it helped cause. Crockett didn't arrive on Wallace's show to be polite or go through the motions of punditry. She came armed with truth, outrage, and a moral compass pointed directly at the heart of performative political theater. Nicolle Wallace had set the stage with her usual polished delivery. She laid out the facts as she saw them: the fresh U.S.-China Tariff truce, a step back from further escalation, a collective sigh of relief from global markets. She presented it as a pragmatic win, a cautious success story amid a chaotic geopolitical landscape. She cited the Dow's minor rally, a brief drop in global oil prices, and a vague promise of resumed negotiations as reasons for hope. It was all delivered in the kind of calm, authoritative tone that so often passes for wisdom in cable news. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't interested in calming people down. She was there to wake them up. From the second Wallace tried to wrap the situation in a bow, Crockett leaned forward with fire in her eyes. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't need to. Her tone was steady, yet it cut through the noise like a blade. "Let's not sit here and pretend like this is some brilliant move," she began. "This isn't leadership, it's damage control, and we're applauding it like it's progress." Crockett was visibly frustrated, not at Wallace personally, but at what Wallace represented in that moment, the elite media machine that too often praises minimal effort as maximal achievement, while ignoring the suffering left in the margins. The camera stayed on her as she drew in a breath, collected her thoughts, and delivered the punchline, "Don't call this normal." Wallace tried to recover, shifting to a tone of professional curiosity. She asked what Crockett thought a better alternative would be, a move often used by pundits to expose the supposed lack of pragmatic solutions from their critics. But Crockett was ready. "A better alternative?" she echoed, raising an eyebrow. "How about not torching the economic landscape in the first place and calling it a strategy? How about listening to the working class before corporate lobbyists?" Her response was unflinching. She painted a picture of devastation, not hypothetical, not theoretical, but lived and real. She talked about small family farms in Texas devastated by retaliatory Chinese tariffs, about welders and manufacturers laid off in waves after steel prices skyrocketed, and about the grocery store clerks and restaurant owners forced to raise prices, only to face backlash from communities who themselves were struggling to make ends meet. She challenged Wallace directly, asking how often media hosts speak to actual workers before declaring economic agreements successful. "When was the last time you walked into a closed factory and asked the workers what normals means to them?" she asked. Wallace paused, clearly thrown off by the intensity of the question. Crockett didn't wait for a reply. She kept going, her voice steady and laced with clarity. "They don't want a truce. They want fairness. They want predictability. They want a government that doesn't use their jobs as pawns in a global game of one-upmanship." The room felt tenser with every word, but Crockett pressed on. She dissected the language used by policymakers and media figures alike, pointing out how euphemisms like market correction, economic leverage, and strategic de-escalation are used to mask the brutality of the impacts they describe. "We don't call it what it is. We don't say people are losing their homes. We say the housing market is cooling. We don't say families can't afford meat and milk. We say inflation is slowing. We've sanitized the pain." Crockett's critique wasn't just of tariffs, it was of a culture that numbs itself to human suffering through jargon and abstraction. Wallace, sensing she was losing control of the narrative, tried again to pivot. She acknowledged that the trade war had hurt many Americans but insisted the Biden administration's efforts to de-escalate tensions were preferable to the instability of Trump's chaotic trade policies. She cited foreign policy experts and analysts who claimed the truce was a sign of effective diplomacy, but Crockett wasn't buying it. "What good is diplomacy that doesn't put people first?" she asked. "This is diplomacy for the stock market, not for the people, and we're calling it a win because the Dow went up 200 points. Tell that to the single mom whose rent went up while her wages stayed the same." Crockett reminded everyone that tariffs are not taxes paid by foreign governments, they're costs passed directly onto American businesses and consumers. "Every time we slap a tariff on imports, we're raising prices at home, and when China retaliates, our exporters suffer. This isn't complicated. It's not some 4D chess game. It's basic cause and effect. She also questioned why the conversation hadn't included any voices from the communities most affected. Why is it that the only people who get to talk about trade on national television are those who don't feel the fallout? Why aren't we interviewing the laid-off factory workers instead of economists in air-conditioned offices? Her words hit hard because they exposed the illusion of progress. A truce isn't a solution, it's a pause. And while the political class congratulates itself for slowing the bleeding, Crockett asked why they never stopped to ask who did the stabbing in the first place. We act like there's no history here, like tariffs fell from the sky. But these were choices, and those choices hurt people. She pointed out that both political parties had enabled the ongoing trade conflict, sometimes using the rhetoric of nationalism, other times cloaked in economic theory. It's not just Trump, it's not just Biden, it's an entire apparatus that views economic hardship as acceptable collateral damage. Crockett also tied the conversation back to racial and social equity. She noted how communities of color often bear the brunt of economic downturns but are rarely centered in conversations about recovery. When prices rise and jobs disappear, it's black and brown neighborhoods that feel it first. But when policies get made, we're an afterthought. Then you'll get on TV and say, look at this new truce, look at this progress, and we're sitting there wondering if anyone sees us. Her words weren't just passionate, they were a demand for recognition, for visibility in a system that often erases the very people it harms the most. The longer she spoke, the clearer it became that this wasn't just a media appearance, it was a public reckoning. Crockett's voice carried the urgency of someone who had nothing to lose by telling the truth and everything to gain by ensuring it was heard. She didn't hide behind politeness or euphemism. She stood in full defiance of the idea that suffering can be mitigated through press releases. We're not supposed to clap when politicians clean up their own messes, she said. We're supposed to demand better. Even viewers who disagreed with her politics found it hard to ignore the raw honesty in her tone. She wasn't spinning facts or auditioning for a soundbite. She was laying bare the human cost of what some see as technical adjustments in foreign policy. She reminded the country that behind every policy are people who don't get to sit on panels, who don't get airtime, who don't have publicists, but who matter just as much as anyone else in the conversation. After the segment aired, clips of Crockett's remarks flooded social media. Political commentators from both sides weighed in, with some praising her courage and others accusing her of being too aggressive. But what was undeniable was the truth she had forced into the open. Her confrontation with Wallace wasn't about who won the debate, it was about exposing the rot beneath the rhetoric. It was about holding the powerful accountable, not just in government but in media, too. Crockett's challenge wasn't personal, it was systemic. She made clear that Wallace wasn't the enemy. The enemy was the normalization of pain, the casual acceptance of policies that devastate communities while being celebrated in television studios. We've got to stop treating survival as success, she said near the end of the interview. This country is too rich, too powerful, and too capable to settle for survival. The message struck a nerve because it asked people to do more than listen. It asked them to see the grocery clerks calculating what to put back on the shelf, to see the farmers watching prices plummet, to see the warehouse workers whose hours have been cut. Crockett asked Americans to reject the lie of normalcy when normal has meant living on the brink. She dared people to imagine what true economic justice might look like and to stop accepting anything less. If this moment moved you, if you believe that truth should never be silenced and that real leadership means standing up even when it's unpopular, then don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss these powerful conversations. Let your voice join the chorus that refuses to accept normal when normal is no longer enough. Join the movement for honesty, accountability, and real change, because the future belongs to those brave enough to demand it.